All right, today we're going to talk about, how volume is quantified. Now, isn't that the question of the century? Because coaches have been talking about that since, exercise science became a thing, and they're going to be talking about that probably 100 years from now, unless my man Andy Galpin unlocks the genetic codes for us that allows us to know exactly how much volume each person should use. But I'm going to give you the way I do it, and I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. That's always my goal. But normally we'll start with there are about three different people. There are people who, what I could consider like a medium volume program. There are people, a lot of people fall in that category. And there's people that need super high volume, like Jackie Bigger. If you drop her volume down, she gets weaker. And then there are people who do really well with low volume and high intensity, like Nathan. Nathan Dameron's, his total volume in a program is not very high. And it works for him. So number one, you got to know your people. Now, besides that, you take the different exercises. You take, for example, anything where there's a lot of eccentric movement and there's a lot of the muscles being stretched under load. Say, for example, an RDL. Or even if you do eccentric deadlifts, there's a lot of eccentric, and there's a lot of eccentrics on the low back. And so anytime the low back is put in the picture, then that exercise needs to be thought of differently than, say, when the low back is taken out of account. For example, you got a deadlift and an RDL versus like a back squat. Well, if someone squats super vertical, there's not a lot of stress on the low back. The next day they're not going to feel it in the low back, and which is exactly what I want. But then you take someone with RDL or a deadlift, they're almost 100% of the time going to feel it in their low back, and there's going to be damage. If you feel it, if you're sore in the low back, there's muscle damage going on. And muscle damage, when I say muscle damage, I'm not saying that you're hurt. I'm just saying that's what happens. It's part of hypertrophy. It's one of the mechanisms. And so anytime that there is lots of eccentric and lots of stretching under a load, then the recovery time needs to be a little bit longer than, say, if there's not a lot of stretching under load or not a lot of eccentric. For example, you can recover a lot quicker from a carry because it's mostly isometric versus like an RDL, where it's all eccentric and all stretching under load, and it's a big joint movement. It's a big hip, low back, and hamstring movement. So that takes a lot. Takes a lot more out of a person than, say, a carry or even like a front squat. Front squat, there's not a lot of stretching under load. You have your quads obviously get stretched, but it's not that extreme stretch like a dumbbell fly. There's a lot of muscle damage going on there, or an RDL. So but then let's take the accessory movements into account too. Every single exercise where there's poundages, reps, and sets, that definitely gets included in your total volume. That's the thing. I know when we were at Muscle Driver USA, we would write a program for people, and then maybe the person would go outside of us and get corrective exercises. Well, those corrective exercises and their protocols were awesome, but what happened, you putting those protocols on top of what we've already prescribed. Well, now sometimes you're going to get even more damage, even though those protocols would be great on their own, or if we collaborated and where we could take some volume off of our program, that would have been fine. But volume on top of volume, eventually there's a breaking point. So there is such thing as overtraining. If you train to the point where you hurt yourself, you're overtrained, obviously. So if you train to the point where you can't sleep at night, you're getting nauseous, you can't eat, you've overtrained. And don't tell me about it's just under recovery. I can train anybody to the point where they get like that. To a point where you can't recover enough. Obviously, think about this. Let's simplify it. If I bring you in the gym and we train 8 hours a day, every single day, there will come a time where you can't recover from that. I can say, let's do deadlifts for 8 hours. So is that under recovery, or is that just too much volume? Obviously, it's too much volume. So there is such a thing. So, but every single thing you do, that comes into account for volume. So to leave you with this, to make it simple, whether it's assistance work or the main lifts that you're trying to do, you got to consider, is there a lot of load on major joints like the low back or shoulders or knees? Is there a lot of eccentric, meaning the negative, is there a lot of eccentric, is there a big eccentric portion of that lift? 2, 3, is there a big stretching under a load like RDLs, dumbbell flies? So consider those 3 things. If you're in that last category, you definitely want more days rest, like 3 maybe. If you're in that 2 where it's like a lot of eccentric, maybe you're going to give that like 2 days. If you're in the first, like say a snatch or clean jerk where there's not a lot of eccentric, you can do those more often. That's why people can do snatch and clean jerk every day. And I wouldn't recommend a full snatch, full clean jerk where it's super heavy every single day, like the Bulgarian method. I wouldn't do that, but you could snatch and clean jerk on Monday, you could do powers on Tuesday, and then repeat the process, because there's not a lot of eccentric. There's 0 eccentric pretty much, except a small part in the catch of a snatch or clean jerk. And so those 3 categories are the ones you got to look at, and the ones you got to think about when you're writing a program. Hey guys, now do me a favor, go subscribe to our channel, like our videos, comment. I promise you, if you comment, I'll get back to you and answer all your questions. Thanks for watching.